Joining us now is Ed Gillespie, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, a national U.S. Senate candidate from Virginia 2014, lost narrowly to Mark Warner in that race. And Ed, the undisputed frontrunner now to be the Republican nominee for governor 3 weeks ago. Ed, good to have you with us, man.
Great to be with you, John. Thanks for having me on.
I got to start with the new Washington Post poll just out the other day. Good news, bad news. Let's get to the good news. Ed, showing your candidacy well in front in this nomination contest, showing you at, I think, 38%. Corey Stewart, the Prince William chairman, second, 18%. Frank Wagner, Senator of Virginia Beach, third, 15%. That gives you basically a 15% lead with 3 weeks to go. You got the highest name ID. You've got $3 million. You're on TV. Personally, Ed, I don't see how you lose this race.
Well, John, I take nothing for granted. I'm working hard every day to get our party's nomination. I'll run a campaign that makes Republicans in Virginia proud, mostly by winning it, but also by standing up for our principles and putting forward a positive agenda to create jobs and raise take-home pay, help people lift themselves out of poverty. And, you know, we have got to get Virginia moving again. And the way to get Virginia moving again is to implement my plan for regulatory relief and tax relief and make it easier to open and grow a business in Virginia, to put a greater focus on startups and scale-ups, to stop being whale hunters like we've been over the past, 25 years, trying to get a Fortune 100 company to move lock, stock, and barrel into Virginia. I am all for that, but that can't be the singular focus of our economic development policy. We need to have a more sustainable long-term approach, and that means a greater focus on small business formation and expansion. And by having an across-the-board tax cut of our individual income tax rates of 10%, that will help small businesses. As you know, most small business owners, the vast majority of small business owners, don't pay a corporate income tax. They pay an individual income tax. And small businesses get hit disproportionately hard by excessive regulations. You know, big companies have lawyers and lobbyists and accountants who can absorb those things and deal with them. Small businesses just get chewed up by excessive regulation, and it requires, a commitment of manpower and expenditures that make it harder for them to open and grow and to hire and to pay their employees more. So, we need to turn things around here in Virginia, and I know my policies will do that.
All right, so in this poll also, Ed Gillespie, it shows either the Democratic candidates, Tom Perriello, Ralph Northam, with a 13-point lead, if you were the nominee, bigger over any of the other opponents that you have. I mean, if you're the nominee, you look at these numbers, you look at the trend, you say, how does a Republican win this race?
Well, first of all, John, we know the history of polls, media polls in Virginia. They're not good. And the fact is, media polls are not designed to measure the outcome of an election. They're designed to affect the outcome of an election. And, I going into my election against Mark Warner in 2014, these media polls had me down double digits. I lost by 0.8 percentage point.
Now they had you down. They had you down. They had you down big.
They're notoriously wrong.
Yep. I mean, look, I remember going into that a week before. One poll had you down by 17.
Yeah, it's
Roanoke
ridiculous.
Or something.
And look, voters know that, and they're not. Even though the media wants to, put a damper on enthusiasm and turnout on the Republican side, our voters know better. They're not fooled by these things.
Look, it's a long way off between now and then. No one knows what's going to happen. I'm focused on June 13th. Let's get to your release you put out yesterday, a new platform, removing barriers to all job creation for all Virginians plan. Can you elaborate on that for our audience, Ed?
Absolutely, John. And, excessive red tape is stifling small business expansion and creation in the Commonwealth. And, if you were to read the Virginia Administrative Code, which is the stack of rules and regulations that govern our lives from the time we wake up till the time we go to bed, and you were to do it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week as your full-time job in a 40-hour work week, it would take you 3 months to read it all. Not to understand it all, just to read it all. And so we need to get rid of antiquated regulations. For every new regulation I would implement as governor, I would repeal or modernize 2 old ones. We need to make it easier to enter the marketplace, and we've got too many barriers to entry in Virginia. Here's an interesting data point for you, John. Over the past 6 years, we have fallen from number 1 on the CNBC list of best states for business to not even in the top 10 any longer, most recently 12 to 13. Chief Executive Magazine 2 weeks ago dropped us from number 10 to number 13 on their list of business-friendly states. From number 12 to number 15. And, we keep dropping at the same time. We're in the top 10 where we don't want to be when it comes to the most onerously regulated states when it comes to occupational licenses. To be a barber in Virginia, John, you have to have 1,500 hours of state-sanctioned training to become a barber, 9 months, and pay a license for that. And I don't know about you, I've never gotten a second bad haircut from the same barber. I can figure this out on my own. I want my dentist to have a state license, but these excessive regulations are barriers to entry that protect incumbents in the marketplace and stifle competition. And so we've got to, take a fresh look at that. We need to make it easier for businesses to comply, and I want to reduce the cost of compliance for businesses to regulation in the Commonwealth by 50%, cut it in half, because, the man hours it takes just to comply and to go online, fill out all the forms that you got to fill out, and you have to fill it out the same forms at different, departments and agencies. We need to make it a lot easier for people to be able to open and grow a business.
What you're talking about is just removing the red tape, the barriers to getting a business going. And look, anybody listening out there that has opened a small business up or tried to open your own business, those that sign the front of checks, not the back like we do, there's just a lot of bureaucracy you got to work yourself through. And some of these barriers that you mentioned, you talk about getting rid of 50%. Well, how would you do that? I mean, you have to go through the state legislator? Do you have to get Democrats to sign it? Do you go through local governments? How do you actually get that implemented, Ed Gillespie?
Well, there's a number of things we could do. From an administrative perspective, we can, we have, for example, the Commonwealth has a business one-stop portal where you should be able to go online and complete all your business formation steps in one place. But it's not been updated or not been paid much attention to. For example, there is a logo of a department that's still on there that was eliminated 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we need to pay more attention to that, update that. We also, need to make it easy to be able to, when you're dealing with different, let's say you're dealing with the Department of Taxation and the Department of Agriculture on an issue, right? You should be able to just input your problem in one place and be able to transfer it across these different silos. And so there's a lot we can do from from an administrative perspective. And we also need to, I would involve the legislature. We need to have a regulatory review and give the General Assembly more authority to review regulations and rules, not just, set a rule and regulation and let it go on forever. There should be periodic reviews, and I think the Assembly should have more say in that. And I think all of the departments and agencies, at least every 10 years, all the regulations that are under their purview should be subject to a review to see if they're fulfilling their intended purpose or if they've grown out of date as the economy has changed. And if so, get rid of them.
And as governor, would you have the executive power to get rid of some of these the way President Trump has with his executive orders?
There are some things you can do with executive authority and some things you would need to do in terms of, setting up processes would involve working with the Assembly, which I would do. As you know, I have the support and the public endorsement of a majority of Republicans in our state Senate and in our state House. They've worked with me in developing this plan, actually. Kirk Cox and Mark Obenshane are the leaders. Kirk is the speaker designee. They are the leaders of my policy development working group. Steve Landis and Glenn Sturdivant are co-chairs of my government reform working group. Frank Ruff and Danny Marshall, they co-chair my economic growth and job creation working group. So I've had the involvement of legislators in this policy development process so that when I get elected, which I intend to do, we can hit the ground running. We don't have time to waste. And, you've got a 4-year governorship. We're at a critical juncture here in Virginia. we have got to get moving on these policies and get us to number one again on those lists of business-friendly states. But more importantly, we should be first in the nation when it comes to economic growth and job creation. And so having the support of these members of our assembly will help make me a more effective governor if and when I'm elected in November.
Ed, let's get to Governor McAuliffe. Had him on my show a week ago, criticized your plan, saying that we don't need a tax cut because it'll hurt our bond rating. But the other thing he said is, he said, look, I don't know what Ed is saying. He said, we have the lowest unemployment rate in Virginia, the lowest number of people applying for unemployment benefits since 1975. We have this robust economy. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, we do have a low unemployment rate. I'd rather have a low unemployment rate than a high unemployment rate any day. But when you look at the factors that contribute to it, John, it's they're disconcerting. We hit a 10-year low in labor force participation rate last year in the Commonwealth. Too many Virginians have left the workforce entirely, discouraged and given up looking for work, and that contributes to a lower unemployment rate. Mm-hmm. We have too many Virginians who are working part-time instead of full-time when they want to work full-time. They'd rather be working 40 hours a week, but they're working 28 hours a week. Mm-hmm. And we have been swapping out high-paying jobs for low-paying jobs for a decade now. We've shed 69,000 manufacturing jobs over the past decade. And so, we need to turn those factors around, and we need to get more people coming back into the workforce, mm-hmm. being able to work full-time and getting good-paying jobs. That's one of the reasons why reduction in our individual income tax rates of 10% across the board, which would not affect our bond rating because it's phased in responsibly over 3 years. It's based on revenue growth projections. And what I'm saying is let's take some of that revenue growth and rather than take money from hard, let them keep more in their own pocket. For every $3 in increased spending, $2 billion in increased spending over the next 5 years, we would allow for $2 to be kept by the taxpayers. But that would not only provide much-needed relief, it would also result in the creation of more than 53,000 full-time, good-paying private sector jobs in Virginia. And that's what we need. That would create more taxpayers, and,
right.
and that would result in more people paying taxes and revenue. So, the fact is we've had more people moving out of Virginia for the past 3 years than moving into Virginia. We hadn't seen that dynamic since they first started collecting that data in 1978. It had never happened before, and now we've had 3 straight years of it, and that reflects a lack of opportunity.
Right.
It's young people who are leaving the Commonwealth with degrees from great schools like, JMU and ODU mm-hmm. and William & Mary and UVA, taking those degrees to other states and contributing to their economy. And it's also retirees who are leaving for lower tax states, and we want to have, in particular, our military retirees who separate from their service here in Virginia to stay in Virginia, contribute to our economy, but they're being pulled south because we're not as competitive as we need to be, and my policies will fix that.
Well, look, any government income tax cut, I don't know what the amount is, how much that means for individual people. I know there's been debate over that, but I'd rather pay less than I'm paying now. That's all I know. 10%, I'm for that. 15%, even better. 8% beats zero. So it'd be hard to say if you're a resident of Virginia that we're undertaxed with all this. That's all I do is sign checks to pay taxes. And then if you get behind, you get penalties and fees. And I mean, for a small businessman in this state, it's a nightmare. The number of things you have to pay. Every time I turn around, my wife is telling me there's something else that has to get paid, and it's tax related in the state of Virginia from all this stuff. Now we got local taxes, car taxes. I mean, it's crazy. So look, anything anybody can do there, I'm for that. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. Scott from Suffolk says, Ed Gillespie, can you tell me your stance on this whole Confederate monument issue that seems to be capturing some of the headlines?
Yeah, I am opposed to the removal of historical statues in the Commonwealth, and I don't think that's the right way to go about things, and I oppose it. It is not unlike one of my opponents who says that's the most important issue facing Virginians right now. I'm not diminishing the importance of it. I oppose removing these historical statues. But to me, the most important issue facing Virginians right now is the lack of opportunity and the fact that we're not creating enough jobs in the Commonwealth to give opportunities to young, Virginians coming out of our colleges and high schools. We've had stagnant economic growth for 5 straight years. For 5 years now, John, our economic growth in Virginia has trailed the national GDP rate. We used to always be above the national GDP rate, and now we are below it. And, we've had 5 straight years where we've had between 0 to 2% in economic growth rates. That's economic stagnation. We should be first in the nation when it comes to job creation and economic growth with our port and our people and our natural resources, our fertile lands, our natural beauty, and our historical landmarks. We should be first in the country in our location. And so to me, that's the most important thing that the next governor is going to have to deal with, is getting Virginia growing again and creating more opportunities for people in the Commonwealth.
All right. And so really what you're talking about just so our listeners to get this straight, because Governor McAuliffe comes on and says, look, we got the lowest unemployment we've had since Jimmy Carter was president. But what you're saying is that's not accounting for the number of people that have dropped out of the workforce. And what you want to do is expand the opportunity to bring those people back in, create 53,000 jobs. And you're saying that a lot of the numbers that show up in unemployment are because people just stop trying to get work. Is it that? My understanding? That's
part of it, and it's also the fact that part-time employment counts as well, and so people who are working 28 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week, they're not unemployed, but they're underemployed, and also people who are working in jobs that aren't commensurate with their 4-year degree, and there's a lot of that in the Commonwealth as well. 25, 26-year-olds who are still living with their parents and working in jobs that aren't commensurate with a 4-year college degree.
Right.
And, that reflects the fact that we've been swapping out high-paying jobs for low-paying jobs over the past decade as well. So, Governor McAuliffe, obviously doesn't get around Virginia the way I do. And I was in Southwest Virginia just last week, and, there's economic pain there. I was on the Northern Neck this week, and there's not enough opportunity there, and we've got areas of the Commonwealth that are just struggling right now. And I can tell you that the people of Virginia that I'm talking to every single day don't feel like we're going gangbusters here, because we're not.
All right, that's going to be the final word. We're out of time. I want to thank Ed Gillespie for being with us today. Ed, we always appreciate your time and your candor, as always. Ed Gillespie, the front runner right now, undisputed favorite to be the Republican nominee for governor of Virginia in 2017. I've got him at now 1-7 odds, which is like secretariat odds at the whatever that race was, something like 1-10. It would take some monumentous event for him not to be the nominee, and I think he's going to do that. For more information, go to ed4virginia.com, ed4virginia.com.